Hello, welcome to Remarkable Lives. Today is November 20th, 2007. We're in Laguna Woods Village, Laguna Woods, California. Today, it is my honor and privilege to have with us a very remarkable person, Mildred Landecker. Music has run throughout your life. It's the thread, it's the essence of who you are, Mildred. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about you and your music from the early days.
How far back should I go? I was about 2.5 when I had a toy piano with the black keys painted on, and I crawled up to play that little. I used to play that, and then there was a real piano, and I crawled up to play that, and I played by ear from the time I was 2.5 until I really learned how to read music at the Juilliard. They were surprised.
Now I understand that you could probably play anything you heard just by ear.
Yes, of course.
Is that right?
Yeah, but that's no problem. I can do that. I can transpose. You know, I used to work with singers, and if the key was wrong, if the music was in the wrong key for them, I would pitch it up or pitch it down, depending on what it was. And this wasn't just little pieces, but these are operatic arias which had to be transposed. And I did it partly by ear and partly by eye and brain.
Netflix?
Now tell us what happened. How did you find yourself at Juilliard? How did that experience go?
Oh, well, luckily somebody suggested that I get real instruction, and my mother thought she could not afford it. So the people that suggested it, one of them said, well, we'll pay for it. But my mother said, no, if I don't pay for it, she doesn't go. They asked how much it would be, and she was told. And so then they said, well, if you can't pay for it, we'll pay what you can't pay. We'll pay for the difference. My mother said, no, if I can't pay for the whole thing, she doesn't go either. And I kept looking back and forth to these two people who were going to be so good to me. I didn't understand how important that was at the time, but I did get into Juilliard, and I was there for 5 years.
Now, at what age did you start Juilliard?
I was about 11 to 16. And then I went to New York University, got my 2 degrees, bachelor's and master's.
Now, you talk about your mother, and I know your mother was a wonderful influence, a very positive influence on your life. Tell us her full name and when she was born, just for the record, please.
She had many names because she was married 3 times, and I don't want to go into that. But when she'd say, your father, I'd say, which one? But she was a remarkable woman. She had a very difficult life. My parents were divorced when I was about 5 or 6, and she really took care of me from that point on. And it was not easy for her. She worked 7 days a week, and my plan was to get a job so that she would get a decent job so that I could see her once a week. But it didn't work out that way because of my height. Shall I tell that?
Yes.
And, in order to get into the Board of Education to teach in the high school or anywhere in the Board of Education, you had to take a big exam which took about 3 years. The last part of the exam was a physical, and I was so happy because at that time I was strong and everything. I didn't have to study for that. Well, they discovered then that I was 1 inch below the minimum. They had a minimum height requirement, and I didn't know that. I just didn't know about that. And so everyone else was assigned a school there was a list, and my name did not appear on it because I had to appear before a group called the Physical Standards Committee. Until they gave me that appointment, it was about a year and a half, I was still waiting to find out what will happen. This meant my whole life. I was planning to become a teacher, and without that, I could never be a teacher for the New York City system, and that's where I was aiming. And so finally, I did appear before a Physical Standards Committee, which was 3 men who were smoking cigars and blowing smoke in my face. And one of them said, "Why don't you teach in the kindergarten? Why are you planning to teach in the high school?" And I said, "Well, because I really plan to teach at the college level. I don't want to be teaching at such a low level." And they said, "Well, we think that would have been better." I said, "Well, then I became very angry because they kept badgering me. And finally I said, I was measured without my shoes, and I don't intend to teach without them." And they said, "That will be all." And I walked out of that room. And the minute the door closed, I burst into tears, and I think the tiles in the ladies' room there are still loose from my tears. I could not stop crying because I knew I had killed my opportunity by answering that way. After about a year, I got this letter, and I think you have a record of that, where it said, "Because of your compensatory traits, we will not withhold the license to teach because of your physical disability," and in parenthesis, "low stature." That letter meant a world to me, and everyone else had been appointed. I lost about 2 or 3 years of salary, and finally I was appointed, and that's what started me. That 1 inch, 1 inch.
Yes. Now, I'm going to get back to your mother because she was a very important influence in your life. For the record, please tell us her full name, her maiden name, her first name and her maiden name, and where she was from and when she was born.
My mother's maiden name was Dora Ury, U-R-Y. She was born in 1889 in New York City. She was one of 8 children, next to the oldest, and the girl, and the others were all boys. So you could imagine what her life was like. She'd run home for lunch and have to wash the diapers that my grandmother had soaked. She was really a slave to the whole family. But when she left school in the 7th grade so she could get a job to help pay for food for the family. She never even graduated from elementary school, and she was very bright.
Now, are you willing, Mildred, to tell us when little Mildred Nesson was born and where?
I was born in Providence, Rhode Island on the 27th of July, 1913. As one of my little private piano students said to me one day, "Are you about 100? And I thought that was right now I wouldn't answer that now, but that was 3 years ago.
Well, do the math. And you know that Mildred has turned 94 in July.
3 months.
And 3 months. So, and as you'll see in this tape, she has not lost one single bit of her dexterity for playing the piano. Now, you had to choose your husband quite carefully, too. Tell us about that.
Well, the most important thing to me was music. And my mother had made 3 big mistakes in her marriages, so I wasn't going to get married at all at first. And as soon as I became interested in someone, or someone became interested in me, I terminated the friendship because I wasn't getting into that situation. However, when this fellow came along, he was the only non-musician that I had ever gone out with. And I sort of liked him, but I wasn't going to get close to him until I was sure that he liked music. Well, usually a girl will have a man tested for syphilis or gonorrhea. But I thought music is what I wanted to see if he had music aptitude. So I asked him, would he object to the test? And he said no, he would not. So I paid $100. When that time I was unemployed, I had to borrow the money to get this test done. I could have given him the test, but I wanted it to be very impersonal. And so he took the test and he came out in the 99th percentile. So I knew that he really did, he had the capacity to love music. He didn't know one note from another, and never did. But then I allowed the friendship to flower.
Now you and husband Louis
Called him Landy.
called him Landecker. He achieved his PhD, much like your son after him did. Both son and father achieved their PhD in physics.
Right.
From what schools, both of them?
Well, Peter got his from Cornell. My son got his from Cornell University, but my husband got his from New York University. I think he was the oldest candidate they ever had. He was 50 years old when he got his PhD. My son was 25 when he got his, because he went straight on from schooling. But my husband was working, never took a day off to work on his PhD and his thesis and his experiment.
And who typed that thesis? The whole thing.
The outline was 130 pages long, the outline, and the thesis was like a book. And I asked my husband, couldn't we get a professional typist? I'm not I can type, of course, but I was nervous. And he said, no, rather I did it because as he was writing it, I could change the wording, the phrasing, because English was my other major. And so I did that, and sometimes I'd have a bell where I was typing. I'd have a bell to call him in for something. We had to get a special, large, heavy typewriter, because mine was just a portable. And we didn't have the Greek letters on the top, so we left it blank, and he had to fill it in by hand.
The special symbols for the
symbols
physics.
for physics,
and math.
yes, that's right.
So you're not only nimble on the piano, but if I need any help typing, I should call on
Please,
you?
no.
Oh, okay.
No, please don't.
Now, both of you were teachers.
Yes, he was a laboratory assistant, and then he always was interested in science. And remember, we came through the Depression. It was very hard. It was even harder for him than it was for me. At least I had a home. I had food. I don't think that's what he had all the time. Anyway, that's the way it was.
Yes. Now, he taught at the high school of...
Well, he started first in a junior high school. That was a terrible experience for him. That's the worst kind of schooling, really. And then he was appointed to, he took the exam and became a teacher of physics at Bronx High School of Science. I was teaching at High School of Music and Art, the two special schools in New York City. We were very happy with our jobs, very happy. And it was just wonderful. And Peter took the exam for both music and art and science, and he passed both of them, of course. So we pushed it. I pushed for him to go to science because he never did any homework in junior high school. He just slid through everything. And I felt that he had to learn how to study. And he worked harder in the high school than he ever did in college. He learned how to study. We used to go to bed and his little light was still on. I could see underneath the door. We'd walk by like 12 and 1 o'clock. He was still working on homework. He had 6 majors, and I mean hard majors. And he really worked very, very hard. Sometimes I'd open the door and he had fallen asleep on his bed with the pen in his hand, and the light was still on.
Now, he had played violin as a kid.
He was a pianist, really, But then in school, you know, they had a music program, and he had to take another instrument. So we thought violin would be good because he had an excellent ear. I wanted him to play clarinet, which I had played, but the dentist said, no, it'll push the teeth out, and he was getting to have the teeth go in. So clarinet was out, and the violin was another small instrument. So he was in playing violin, I think, more than 25 years in a symphony orchestra, an amateur symphony orchestra in the Redondo Beach area.
Now, Landy and you were very instrumental in the beginning of your living here in what was called Leisure World. You did square dancing and ballroom dancing.
Round dancing.
Round dancing.
Yeah.
Both of you probably were on the floor and everybody was in rapt attention at the two of you floating around with the greatest of ease.
I don't think we were exceptional, but we did make amazing progress. In fact, we had gone beyond the levels that we had here. So we used to go to Anaheim to a special group, and there we used to dance every Tuesday night. And my husband would record the whole thing. And then on Wednesday, we rented a room in Leisure World, and he would turn on the tape, and we'd have a square. Other people who had gone with us wanted to practice what we learned Tuesday night. And he would turn it on, and we would fall apart immediately. And so he'd turn off the tape, and he would teach them. He would teach everything we supposedly learned Tuesday night, which we didn't. And so that's what we would do every Wednesday night to learn. So we were much better the following Tuesday. The only trouble is that caller never repeated anything. He would only go do some strange things. So all our practice, well, it was good practice, but it didn't help very much. We still fell apart.
Not only did you study piano at the Juilliard, you also coached voice and you did conducting. Tell us about a little about that.
Well, after I graduated, finished with Juilliard, I went to New York University, but then I continued to study privately with the finest teachers, and then I began to study voice. My voice teacher wouldn't take me till the day I was 16. That's when I graduated from high school, and absolutely at that point. So I began to study voice, and I did a lot of radio work. I don't have a big voice. I'm not an operatic singer, but I can I can pick up a piece of music and read it, so it's no problem whatsoever. So that I did a lot of vocal work. In fact, I earned more money singing than I did playing. But I'm essentially a pianist, of course.
Now, about your conducting, how did that turn
Well,
out?
at Music and Art, I had the senior chorus, I had the junior chorus, and I was a conductor of the chorus, and sometimes I even arranged the music. We did a beautiful piece by Pergolesi, and it was just a piano accompaniment, and it was very thin, so I arranged it for flute and cello and piano to accompany it was a girls' chorus then, and it was just remarkable because it was so easy to do.
And I understand that you have some famous people who you have influenced in their lives and their careers. Tell us about a few, please.
Well, of course, Hal Linden is now in a play, and my son went to see that play. And so when I visit him this weekend, I'm going to see that play so that I can see Hal Linden. Hal Linden said, I forced him to sight read. I forced him. He was in my class, and we were doing solfeggio, and then he learned to sight read. And so because he could pick up a piece of music without rehearsing very much, they called him for all the commercials. And then he got his toe in the door and became an actor. But he's a wonderful fellow. Also, of course, there's Shari Lewis. I think you probably know about her. She was my voice student, and she was a remarkable person. And Diane Carroll, about that beautiful black girl, and so many others. Alan Vogel, who was a professional oboist. There's so many of them.
In your many honors and accolades, you have been given the Emeritus Saddleback Emeritus Program Teacher of the Year Award.
Oh, yes.
And you had been chosen in the month of February, I understand, 1995.
That's correct.
As what they called then Leisure Worlder of the Month. We now call the Honoree of the Month. Any comments about that?
Well, it was a big surprise to me, but that's what they did. First came the February 1995 Leisure Worlder of the Month, but then subsequently I've been with the Saddleback College for 28 years, and they gave me a little plaque. I think we have a picture of it, and which says the Teacher of the Year or something like that. And I was surprised because they had never done that before, and they haven't done that since. But I guess because of my age.
Well, we all know it's more than your age. We have all enjoyed Mildred's classes through the years, and it's always a delight, and always different. That's what's so amazing. You prepare like
Oh, yes.
like it was your first class of your first day of teaching. You're so fastidious.
Well, they're so interested. One of my students said, "I've taken your course 10 times, and it's never the same. I can compare the notes that I took, and they are all different."
Would you care to read what a student wrote to you?
Well, she said, "If I had never met you, all Mondays would be blue. I would have to clean the house every Monday from 9 to 12 and Thursdays from 1 to 4. I would never have known that Mozart wrote his last 3 symphonies in 6 weeks. I would never have known that Beethoven wrote only 1 opera, or that Joseph Haydn wrote 104 symphonies, or that Rossini wrote 40 operas in 15 years, or that there are chromatics, terracing, and so forth." This is all technical.
Yeah.
Or that Tchaikovsky was once a law student. Of course, there is so much more, but I did meet you, and my life is more enriched by the knowledge, by that knowledge, and by the knowledge you pass on the music now in my head, and your wonderful friendship.
That's nice. We've all learned so much from Mildred through the years, and you've also taught privately. You've taught your young students, older students. Do you have some good stories from that?
Well, one of them is he was 5 years old, and he turned to me and he said, "Are you about 100?" I thought that was a little bit invasive. And then I had another little student who was also about 5, and at the end of his lesson, I used to give him a lollipop. But how did I get the lollipops? One of my other students would steal lollipops from her dentist's office to give them to me so I could give them to this little boy. And one day, he only wanted blue lollipops. But one day, I gave him a pink one or something, and he said, "I want a blue one." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't think I have any more blue ones." And he said, "Oh, yes, you do. They're in your refrigerator."
That's cute. There was a honeymoon in your life, and I want to hear about it.
Not mine.
Oh, shucks, not yours?
No, my mother, she did everything. And she was married for the 3rd time, and she decided that she had never had a honeymoon, so she decided to do one. And naturally, she didn't want to leave me home alone, and I didn't want to be the 3rd on a honeymoon, so I took my cousin along. So there were 4 of us on her honeymoon. We crossed the continent by rail, by train, and then we went up to Alaska to visit my uncle, her brother, and his family. When we arrived, my uncle said, why don't you give a piano recital? There's never been a piano recital in this town. And I said, I can't do that. I'm on my mother's honeymoon. And I had no music with me. He said, well, think about it. So I thought a little bit, and finally I evolved a kind of miserable program. And I played in a hall called the IOOF Hall, Independent Order of Odd Fellows. It's still there. That hall is still there. I played on a miserable upright piano. We didn't know whether to face the back to the audience, the back of the piano, or my back to the audience. Anyway, I gave the recital, and the next day there was in the newspaper it said, a genius was heard last night.
Well, this Nothing program consisted of all the greats, as I recall seeing it. What did you play?
Oh, of course,
From memory.
Bach and Beethoven and modern things and Russian things. It was an extraordinary program that I had to dig out of my brain, which was very tired at that point.
From memory and no
Yeah.
music.
Yes,
That's fantastic. Yes. Now you never had a honeymoon. Is that right?
No.
Why not? You don't like fun?
We were married on a Thursday, but we both worked on Thursday, and my chairman allowed me to leave 42 minutes earlier so I could get to the municipal building to be married before 4 o'clock when it was closed. And dog licenses were $3 and marriage licenses were $2. So we got the marriage license, and we were married on a Thursday afternoon, and Friday morning I had decided not to go to school. I was a substitute, $7.50 a day, and I thought I would take that one day. And I called my mother, and that morning from a restaurant, because we had just arrived and we had no food of any kind in the house, and she said, you just got a letter from the Board of Examiners. I said, oh my goodness, because I'd been waiting for it for months. And it said that the next part of the exam was to be in a few days. It was the organ test. Well, when she said it was the organ test, I burst into laughter. And she said, how could you laugh? You used to be so serious about this. And suddenly it's such a funny thing to you. I don't understand your attitude. And although she had been married 3 times, she did not know the word organ had other meanings. And so I left my husband and ran back to the school, even though I wasn't being paid, to practice the organ, because I had to be in perfect condition to. And then it was the big joke in the school, not among the students, of course, but the faculty. Every time they said, "You passed your organ test," it must have been a good. You must have been in good condition to pass your organ test.
I have a funny feeling the students knew, but you didn't know they knew.
No, they did not know.
Well, they should have known.
Too embarrassing.
Oh, all the better. Well, Mildred, you have really had a wonderful life, and though you might not have had a honeymoon per se with the wonderful Louis Landecker, you called him Landy, I think your life with him was one big honeymoon. I think he was the love of your life.
Yes.
And it shows whenever you talk about him or make mention of him, and that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. My mother tried so many times, but I did it the first time.
Right on. Very good. Now, any other thing you want to share with us? Any other funny stories or things about Peter or your...
There are so many stories about Peter, but one was when he was a little boy. He was about 2.5. We lived just across the big oval from my mother and my stepfather. And whenever we had to go out in the evening, we didn't have to have a babysitter because we bring Peter to his grandmother's and grandfather, so he'd sleep there that night. Well, one night it was the summertime, the sun was bright and everything, and we put his pajamas and a toothbrush in a paper sack and said, "Go to Grandma." And he knew the way to Grandma. There were no crossings. He had to just walk across a grassy lane. So he went down. We lived on the 7th floor, and we could see him walking, and just as he started to walk, it began to rain. But it just rained very hard. He had never been out in rain. He probably thought he was taking a shower in public. And he kept looking up at the sky, and meanwhile the paper sack got soaked, and the pajamas and the toothbrush fell to the pavement. And he looked down at the pavement, wondering what to do, and we kept shouting from the 7th floor, but he couldn't hear us. And finally, he decided to pick up his toothbrush and pajamas and ran to Grandma.
What a kid. You trained him well. And now he goes cavorting with the fish and the blue jays, and he's just and his tortoises, and he's a true lover of nature. That's wonderful.
In his garage, I was helping him to clean it out. I was just there this weekend, this Thanksgiving weekend. He said, "Would you like to help me clean the garage?" This is a garage like which you have never seen. He has never put his car in there. He couldn't possibly even get himself in there. So we started to take things out, and suddenly I saw these 2 big barrels with newspaper all shredded on the top. And I said, "Peter, this might be a fire hazard. What's in there?" And I was about to put my hand in, and he said, "Don't put your hand in there. The tortoises are hibernating. Tortoises hibernate like bears, and they hibernate for about 6 months." And he had 2 big barrels full of tortoises who were taking an evening nap.
A long evening nap.
Long.
That's great. If you, Mildred, were going to leave a legacy in words for your students and for any serious students of music and art, what might it be?
The most important thing for my students, of course, they are beyond beginning to study music, but they do have relatives, grandchildren, etc. My advice to them is to get the very best teachers that they can find. Not necessarily the most expensive, but the very best. A good school, music school, it might be a good idea if they don't know an individual to teach their grandchildren. The very best is, it's just wrong to start the wrong way. And you can never undo poor teaching.
Good advice.
Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have this time with Mildred Landecker, Professor of Music at the Emeritus Institute from the Saddleback Valley, what's it called?
College.
Saddleback College. Saddleback College, yes. Which the home college is located in Mission Viejo, California. Mildred has been teaching for the Emeritus Institute for how many years?
Almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years. We have all benefited from her wonderful teaching, her wonderful humor, and for the variety of music and energy and enthusiasm that she brings to it. Not to mention, she always has everybody in stitches every class. So I thank you for this time together. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful meeting your very lovely, handsome, brilliant son, Peter, and his lovely partner, Lenore, and getting to know your husband, your deceased husband, vicariously. I wish I could have known him.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you again, and I hope it will continue and see you occasionally.
Thank you. If you've wanted to know why the change of clothes, Mildred is a performer par excellence. She can change clothes at the drop of a dime. We happened to have an electrical blackout when we were first taping this, and we had to come back. And Mildred just wanted to expose you to another one of her many many pieces of wardrobe.
Yes.
Today we're in Mildred Landecker's house in Laguna Woods Village. We have the privilege of having Mildred and her son, Dr. Peter Bruce Landecker, PhD in physics. We are sitting in front of the beautiful grand Steinway piano, one of Mildred's pride and joys, and another of her pride and joys is her son, Peter. Today we're going to hear stories about Peter and Mom. They're going to talk back and forth and share some things about their lives together and maybe have a few laughs. And I'm looking forward to it. Mildred, are you?
Yes. What else can I say?
Here we go.
Peter and I have an unusual relationship because the minute school was out, we were packed and we were on our way camping across the United States and Canada and Alaska. So we were together for 2 whole months, day and night. It was interesting. That's the smallest word I can think of. We had very many experiences, some of which I can tell you later. Would you want to tell some of them?
Well, I remember the quality trips that we took together, leaving from New York City and heading west, always to different places. And it was really fun to be self-sufficient on the road and visit new places and spend time as a family, visiting many of the national parks and the beautiful and cultural and historical places in the United States. There's so much to see. It was nice getting away from New York City in the summertime as well.
Especially from a very hot apartment. We had a very hot apartment. The incinerator was right outside our door, so we felt we were being incinerated all the time. And it was only one, there was no cross ventilation, so we could just die. But we were on our way the day after school closed, and we were together morning and night for 2 whole months. We cooked. I cooked. We had a 2-burner Coleman stove, and we swam in various places. We went swimming every day because that was the way we took care of our personal things. We had a wonderful time.
I remember when my father actually built a camper out of a station wagon. He designed it and he built it with wood and metal that would house the bed and the various boxes that were used to store things. It was a project of his, and it showed his inventiveness and his love of nature and his wanting to explore new places.
We had a Cardex system. We had cartons, everything. We had to take clothing for cold weather and warm weather. We had to take pots and pans. We had to take food. It was an amazing assembly. It's just as if we were going on a safari. Every time we were starting out, the neighbors would look at us strangely because nobody went camping from New York City, but we did.
Yeah, it developed my love of nature. I even brought some of that nature back with me to the Bronx. One example I remember, we caught a couple of chipmunks, western chipmunks, and brought them back to New York City and fed them. And eventually we had baby chipmunks, so I called the Bronx Zoo to find out what to do about baby chipmunks. Do you separate the male? What do you do? And they thought I was crazy because they looked up and apparently nobody had ever bred western chipmunks in captivity before, so they thought it was a hoax. I also remember bringing back a horned toad, and he only liked live flies, so I developed a very, very, very powerful knack of catching live flies in New York City and then serving them to my horned toad pet.
Yes. The chipmunks were marvelous. As soon as the babies were born, I made little cards, blue cards and pink cards, because we didn't know what they were, male or female, and I distributed them to my students, and they were laughing, baby chipmunks born. But it was really very interesting because first we had them all together, and then we were afraid that the father might hurt the babies, so we took the father out. And then we found that the mother was hurting the babies because they were in a jar, and they didn't have enough room. We didn't know that. And so she was killing them. Every time they had another brood, she would kill them. And finally, we had 3 different cages. I had a very small kitchen to begin with, so you could imagine how I managed. But we had 3 different cages, the father in one, the mother in the other, and the babies with the mother with the babies. And then when the babies were born, we separated them after the mother finished with the babies.
Yeah. I remember in the apartment occasionally an esteemed visitor would come. I remember Gloria Davy came. She was the first black woman to perform at the Metropolitan Opera, and I remember she sang in
My
here.
student.
She was my mother's student, and my mother brought her home to her, and I was listening to them performing in the living room.
That was a time. I used him. He was only about 8 or 9 years old. Usually I had her at my studio, but I wanted to do recording. Since he knew how to do the recording and I couldn't record and play at the same time, I was accompanying her. And she, as Peter said, she was black, and I was afraid that there would be an attitude. So she was facing me, and he was making faces like, ooh, as she was singing. And I was hoping that she would not turn her head and see what he was doing, because she might misunderstand what his gestures meant. But finally, I could have killed him, but finally we got it all on tape.
What did his gestures mean?
He didn't like voice. He doesn't like voice. He's an instrumentalist, and he doesn't like vocal. He doesn't like opera and so on. Or at that time he didn't. He certainly didn't like a soprano screaming at the top of her lungs. But she had a beautiful scream. She was a gorgeous woman, beautiful, very tall.
Speaking of opera, a cherished moment for me, and I know my mom too, was James Conlon, who is music director of the LA Opera, was one of my mother's former students and invited us to Dorothy Chandler, and we went backstage, in fact, a couple of times.
Yes, quite.
And then it was really nice for me to see my mother, the teacher, and James Conlon, the student, interacting and recalling events that happened many years ago.
Yes. I was his first conducting teacher, and he has achieved great things. He went to Juilliard afterwards, of course, and he was in Paris or in France for about 11 or 12 years till he got this job. And I was worried because he was so good, and they were just taking European conductors here instead of thinking about James Conlon. He was terrific musician and an excellent teacher. I mean, he's more, I mean, as he works with the orchestra or the soloist, he teaches them. He doesn't just beat time. So I was so happy he got that wonderful job.
I was impressed by him because not only was he musically perfect, in my opinion, but in terms of his conducting and his knowledge of music, but you know, he just was a wonderful person, a warm person to my mother and to me. I mean, I didn't know him before we met, but he just was very accepting and was interested in me, and it was a delightful experience. And I have to thank my mother for many such experiences throughout my life.
I'm glad I've given you a nice experience.
Scuba diving is a love of yours, Peter. How did that all come about? Was that an experience your mother gave you? Or?
No. I always had seen the Cousteau films when I was a young boy, and it always was interesting to me. And when I moved out to California in the mid-'70s, there's wonderful scuba diving just offshore here in the islands offshore from California. So I decided I would, even though I wasn't a youngster anymore, I would learn scuba diving, and I've been diving for more than 30 years now and enjoying it. I just came back from a 1-week trip diving with hammerhead and whale sharks in La Paz, Baja, Mexico, and I've logged more than almost 1,600 dives, which is a lot for an amateur and somebody who's not a dive master and professional doing it every day. I've enjoyed underwater photography, and every dive is different. It's exciting, something new. And I enjoy sharing some of the pictures and videos with my mom, although she hasn't been part of that. I showed her some videos, I think, of when I was diving in the Long Beach Aquarium.
Yes.
And
we have pictures of that.
And pictures of my diving with big critters.
And Lenore took the pictures from outside, of course, and Peter was in the tank.
Your lifelong partner, Lenore,
Yes.
has been very involved with the scuba diving and photographing you, at least, in the Long Beach Aquarium. I saw some of those pictures.
Yes.
Now, you also have a website, don't you, that shows these gorgeous, gorgeous pictures. I've seen them.
Yes.
And it also has a page for your mom as well. You want to give us that website?
Yes, well, it's a separate page. Actually, the page for my mother is geocities.com /M. Landecker. If you go there, then you'll be able to see information about my mom's life that she provided me. And I think it's a nice page, and there's probably a link to my page from her page.
And if you just go to Peter Landecker, you'll get to your page.
Yes, that's right.
From there, you'll go down and you'll find your mom's.
That's right. If you Google Mildred Landecker or Peter Landecker, you can get to our respective pages pretty quickly.
Now, Mildred, you must tell us about when Peter was born and some of his kid stories. I know you have some.
Well, there are so many. He was born during the war, and we couldn't provide toys for him because the metal and wood were unavailable. So he used cereal boxes and the covers of pots and pans. The covers were his toys. So, but then he always wanted a tricycle. And I said, when the war is over, you'll get a tricycle. Well, one day, apparently it was announced on the radio. Peter was a little fellow, and the radio was on. He must have heard it. And so suddenly, here he came pedaling along on a tricycle, which we did not own. And the mother of the person who owned the tricycle, the girl were both running after Peter, trying to grab the tricycle back from him. And he was pedaling away like he was going to another sphere. And finally we got him off, and he said, but you said when the war is over I'll have a tricycle. Well, here it is. That was really a funny thing.
Do you remember that, Peter?
Absolutely not, no. My mother has a great memory, and she remembers many stories that I don't remember, but I believe fully.
One of them was in the morning when my husband was going to work. He would put out the playpen and Peter was in it because I was not feeling well and I was sort of in the house. And one day the bottom of the playpen came out, so he escaped. And when I went out to get him, he wasn't in the playpen. Well, all the mothers in the area, this was a group of private homes, they all helped they all started to look for the child because there was a railroad right nearby, and I didn't even want to go to that direction. So the mother said, "Don't, you go the other way. We'll take care of that area." They all looked around and tried to find the little child crawl. He was walking, just barely walking. Meanwhile, he had gone to every house that looked like ours, and when he got to the door and a woman came, he'd say, "You are not my mother," and then he would turn around and go to another house that looked very much, it was a group of houses that were similar and not all of the same. And finally, when I followed and I got to a mother, she said, yes, the little boy, a little child came and said, you are not my mother. So then I knew I was on the right track. So he hadn't gone to the railroad track. That was why I was so nervous about that. Anyway, that was a funny story.
One thing that I recall, recent activity with my mom. Every year now for the last almost 20 years, my mom and our friend Jane and Lenore have gone to different parts of the world, as far away as Spain, on a timeshare exchange. Every year it's a different place, and it's spending a quality week with my mom, away from her classes and her students, and away from my activities that around the house, and it's a way of focusing with each other while we have
1 week.
Have time, and we have quality time experiences together, doing new things, exploring new places.
Wonderful.
Next month we're going to Palm Springs for a week, and last year, well, we've gone just every year we've gone to 15 or 20 different places.
Just wonderful. It's your timeshare.
Yes.
And you're the one that's instigated the whole thing.
Yes.
So it's just wonderful, because otherwise I would not be traveling at this time.
Hi, I'm Lenore Snowdy, and I want to share some memories about Peter and about his parents. I want first to tell you about the time Peter and I met each other. We were at a meeting of our local fellowship, and during the course of the evening, we were getting acquainted, all the members of the group getting acquainted. And I was actually, I must tell you, quite smitten with Peter right away. But by the end of the evening, I thought, well, there's no way I have any kind of a chance with this man. So as we were saying goodbye, I just went into the kitchen and started washing dishes, because it had been a potluck. And I just started washing dishes. And to my surprise, Peter came to the door of the kitchen and just said goodbye across the kitchen with a smile. So I thought, oh, a glimmer of hope. And it turned out later there was some hope. Well, later on, I met his parents, Louis and Mildred. And my memory of Louis was that he was reserved but unfailingly polite. And I appreciated him as a person who was so resourceful, and so much the core. There were two cores, but he was certainly one half of the core of the family. And then when it comes to Mildred, one of the chief memories I have of Mildred was whether she was arriving at our door of our house, or whether we were arriving at the door of her house, there was this great famous smile that was always there. That smile you'll see in many of her pictures, and that's just a smile that is engraved in my heart, and I'm sure I'll remember that as long as I live. And I've just appreciated knowing this family so much.
I understand that, Peter, you are now recently retired, and your mother, at age 94, is still working.
Someone has to pay the bills. Someone has to pay the bills.
I've asked my mother to retire, but you know, parents these days just don't listen to their children anymore. And so, but I'll follow my own advice and retire. And I'm enjoying my retirement. I retired a few months ago, and I'm as busy as ever, and I have many projects. And so I think it was the right decision for me. But I respect my mom's decision as well.
Thank you. He wanted me to retire several years ago, but at that time I was, thinking about it. But I just love my students, and I love teaching. And if I didn't have that, I would be lost, really. So I didn't listen to you at that time, and now here I am.
And Peter, you're a musician in your own right, in an orchestra for the last 25 years, isn't that so?
Yeah, for more than that, for about 30 years. I started actually I almost became a professional musician in New York City. I was studying with very good teachers that my mother provided. And I started with piano and then played the clarinet a little bit. And,
Did you really?
And the viola a little bit.
Oh,
yeah,
viola, I
yeah,
didn't know.
And,
No.
and the violin.
Violin.
And when I came out to California, I decided I wanted to pick that up again, so I went to a local community orchestra, the Beach City Symphony Orchestra. We give 4 concerts at El Camino College in Torrance, California every year. And I've been enjoying that. We just gave a concert a couple of weeks ago, and it's a challenge for me to play because I'm not a professional and I don't practice. But it's still fun to try playing different pieces and getting to know them very well. So yes, music is an important part of my life, not just performing, but I enjoy going to concerts as well, and I thank my mother for introducing me to music and making it really pushing. I was being polite, but with a hammer, and no, but with an axe, no.
We have a picture.
With an axe? You have a picture with an axe?
No, not an axe, but I have a picture hitting you over the head with a paddle.
Oh, well, who knows?
While you were trying to play the violin.
Oh, well, did it help? Anyway, music has been an important part of my life, thanks to my mom, and I want to thank her for that.
Well, the first time that I visited him after he became a member of that orchestra, which is an excellent orchestra, by the way, I said to him how I knew that he was not a very fine violinist, and I said, "How do you manage? What music do you play?" And he brought out some music. Like Wagner, and it was very complicated, and notes were like 30-second notes, very many notes in a measure. And I said to him, "How do you manage to do that, Peter?" And he said, "Well, I share a music stand with another violinist, and we made an arrangement. We play every other note."
Well, that's not true. But,
I thought that was a cute answer.
But yeah, I know enough to be able to not play a solo when I'm not supposed to. I did start a quartet when I was in New York City, and the other 3 people in the quartet became professional musicians.
Yes.
One of them, Roy Sun, is still and just about to retire, but until recently, first violinist with the Pittsburgh Symphony, and Steve Cates was.
Yeah, he was the cellist.
He was the cellist, a famous cellist. The father was in the New York Philharmonic, and I remember those were good days when I almost went into music.
And that was better that he didn't, because it's not a good field. Unless teaching is one area, and he was not interested in teaching. So it would have to be performing or composing. And he did compose one piece, which later you can see. We can take a photograph of that, when he was a very young child. Apparently, the teacher of the theory class in the music school where he attended had saved this piece. And when he was about 16 or 17, he was going to Columbia College, and he got a phone call, and the man said, "Is little Peter there?" Because he had this thing from his childhood. And I said, "Oh, he's not home quite yet." So anyway, when he came home, Peter said, "Yes, I'm here." And so the man was collecting pieces that were written by children, and also that were decorated in art for these pieces, and he made a book of it. But the funny part was, Peter got on the phone with this man, and apparently I could only hear Peter's part, of course, and I heard Peter say, "What, only $5?" Because the man was going to buy him out so he could have it. And I said, take it, anything to be published, take it. And so we did, and we now have it.
I grew up in New York City, and there were two very good high schools, public high schools in New York City, the High School of Music and Art where my mother taught, and the Bronx High School of Science where my father taught. And there were entrance exams to both schools, and only 10% of the people get into each school.
That's right.
And I took exams to both schools, and I got into both. So I had a real problem. Did I want to go into music or science? And did I want to please my mother or my father? That's not an easy one. But anyway, I ended up asking a lot of people, and eventually I asked my famous violin teacher what I should do. And he actually gave me great advice. He said, Peter, go into science. And I've enjoyed science with music on the side ever since.
I really pushed the science too, because you were so bright, and if you had gone to music and art, you would have just done nothing at all. And this way, they really worked you at that high school, and you worked harder in the high school than most people work at college. And you learned how to study, and you became a great scientist.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say a few things about your musical activities since you came to Leisure World? I was amazed at all the things you've done, you and Dad both did since they came to Leisure World.
Yeah. When I first came here, I had given away all my material, a lot of music books and so forth, because I had not intended to teach anymore. I was changing. I took all kinds of courses, ceramics, slip casting, everything. Swimming.
You were doing dancing.
Yeah, square dancing, round dancing, ballroom dancing, a lot of and sewing. Oh, that was the worst. But sewing, I had to learn how to sew because I'm so short. Everything I buy doesn't fit. I look like I'm standing in a hole. So I had to learn to alter. Alteration is very difficult. Anyway, I took a lot of courses, and after about a year, I began to have a funny feeling. I thought it was a recurrence of my ulcers because it was a strange feeling. And then I realized that I was missing teaching music. So then somehow they got hold of me, and I began to teach at the college.
Yeah, and Daddy was teaching computer science.
Computer science, and also something about the world around you. You know, why is the sky blue? What causes volcanoes? All that sort of thing. And people would come in with all kinds of questions, and Landy, my husband, would take things from my kitchen. I'd miss all kinds of things. He used them to demonstrate things. And sometimes I'd say, "Where's my ladle? Where's my sifter? Where is that?" Oh, he said, "Oh, I have it in my box. I'm showing something and using that in my demonstration." He actually introduced computers to the public library on Raymond Avenue or Raymond Place, whatever it is. And he and another man bought the computers. The students contributed. They bought the computers for the library, and then they went there for 2 or 3 weeks every day to teach people how to use the computers, because at that time there weren't that many computers around, and that's how it got started.
I remember when he was telling me about the TRS-80 Radio Shack computer, and I ended up buying one, and he helped me make it work, because in those days computers weren't always user-friendly and were pretty basic and had all kinds of little quirks. And so it was nice to have some interactions with my father while he was alive. His showing me how to make my my TRS-80 computer work properly, and it got me more interested in computers. The website that we talked about before is in part just an outgrowth of that kind of interest in computers.
So after I began to teach here, I began to perform. There were people, I was working with people, and we would do performances for various clubs in and around the Leisure World. So it was quite exciting for me, because then I was acting as an accompanist, and then I became a voice coach. And I was working with an elderly, I say elderly, I know what I'm saying, elderly gentleman who I had sung at Met many years before. And he was about 80 when he started with me. But first we started with just a little bit. And he said to me, do you know Home on the Range? And I said, Home on the Range? Yes, I think so. He said, what key do you play it in? I said, what key would you like it in? Because I transpose very easily. And so he said, I think we're in business. And then we started.
Yeah, that amazes me. Not only can my mother play any piece, almost any piece, but she can play it in any key. And she can do that real time. I can't. I mean, her mind is really, really, really sharp, and her musical mind is still at its peak. I'm really amazed by her abilities in music to transpose a piece that she's sort of making up on the fly. And I don't know how she does it, but she is a remarkable woman. You're teaching privately too, piano and other things?
I'm just teaching harmonic analysis and piano. I'm not teaching voice because I've lost mine and I can't demonstrate anymore.
What courses have you taught at Saddleback College in music?
Well, the history of music, history and appreciation of music, which I've been teaching for a long time, but it changes all the time. People are in my class for 8 or 10 semesters and they say it's different every time. They have the notes and they can prove that to themselves too. And then I'm teaching a course in the development of opera, and that's a fairly new course. I did teach music fundamentals, which was a theory course, and I loved teaching it, but for some reason it can only be taught, it can only be taken 3 times by the students, and they were very upset. You can't learn the theory of music in 3 semesters. You just can't. And so they asked me what we could do about that, and I suggested that we take another one. They didn't know that I was interested in teaching opera because they had 2 other people teaching opera. Anyway,
but you're still teaching 3 courses now.
Oh yes,
at 94. And
94 in 3 months.
That's amazing. How long have you been teaching at Saddleback College?
About 28 years.
Wow. And how long did you teach at the High School of Music and Art?
30 some odd.
That's really remarkable.
Yeah.